welcome back. Today's video I'm carrying on from where I left off last time, discussing Happe and Frith's article on a changing concept of autism. And thank you for your comments, which I'll get back to in due course. So I just got up to the bit where they were talking about the fourth changing autism concept from discrete to dimensional. That's where I got up to. And I was saying how originally autism was conceived as a discrete categorical entity, and more lately it has moved to a dimensional concept. The idea that, at least on a behavioural level, behavioural and genetic level, and even on the neuroanatomical level, there is no clear cut-off between autism and the rest of the population. But again, there was a suggestion as to whether or not, on a cognitive level, there is a clear categorical break. And that's the question mark. That cognitively, autism may present a qualitative difference in some respects and not in others. So I said how the theory of mind deficit account posited a qualitative difference, but other cognitive characteristics may fit a more dimensional approach, or quantitative approach, for example, executive dysfunction and weak central coherence. The suggestion being that there are qualitative differences in detail-focused cognitive style. Weak central coherence meaning the tendency to focus on details as opposed to wholes. And also that sensory may also be more of a dimensional approach as well. And then I just got up to the bit where they're talking about a shift to the search instead for stratification biomarkers. Stratification biomarkers, markers that might predict differences in, for example, prognosis within groups of autistic individuals. So, as opposed to qualitatively distinct diagnostic biomarkers, distinguishing autism from non-autism that have not been found. So as I was saying, so previously, when autism was seen as a distinct entity, a discrete entity, they were trying to look for qualitatively distinct diagnostic biomarkers that would separate autism from the non-autistic population, but they have not been found. So that's why they're thinking that it would be better, more fruitful, to look instead for stratification biomarkers, which is to say markers that might predict differences in prognosis within groups of autistic individuals. I think that would be a very good thing, because clearly there are great differences in prognosis. Prognosis can be measured in different ways, of course. You know, the question being, what is a good outcome? Often good outcome is looked at in terms of achieving certain functional attainments, such as, having a good job, or being able to be in a relationship, and those things are often looked at as good outcomes. But then, of course, as we know, it isn't as clear cut as that, is it? It's a lot more complex than that. An autistic person might be fortunate enough to find a good job, potentially, but that doesn't tell us the whole picture as to how they got there. What support did they receive? Maybe their parents had helped them a lot. Maybe they were just lucky in having a particular special interest that enabled them to get a job. There are lots of variables. They might still be struggling immensely in their day-to-day life. They might be finding life very difficult still. They might be finding their work very exhausting. They might get into all sorts of trouble at work. So just because someone's got a job, we don't necessarily know the backstory of that. Likewise, if someone gets a relationship, again, there are lots of reasons. Good luck, being in the right place at the right time. I don't know. Again, lots and lots of different variables involved, and they might still be struggling immensely in other areas of their life. So you can't just take any one kind of functional attainment, if you like, and kind of say that that's necessarily a good outcome without looking at the whole kind of backstory as to how the person got there and what other things are going on in their life. It's obviously a lot more complex than just one of these things, isn't it? It's a very complex thing. So, it's very complex. But nevertheless, I suppose some autistic people do seem to kind of achieve lots of things. So they might, for example, get a very good job, maybe not just like a sort of entry-level job, but a very good job. And they might also manage to find a partner and manage to raise a family, and maybe don't see themselves as having an impairment, don't see themselves as disabled. And I would say that's when you get to that level of success, and where the person themselves don't see themselves as being impaired or struggling in a significant way, because obviously you can't just take external objective metrics of success. You've got to understand that, say, the person themselves might feel very, very impaired and feel very, very disordered and so on. But if the person has achieved objective measures of success and is going and says, I don't feel it's a disorder, I don't feel I'm impaired, as indeed lots of people who do a diversity movement do, that obviously you have to say, well, that's obviously a very, very good outcome. And obviously that type of person is not the same in the same situation as what I'm in. They've obviously it's obviously got to be seen as a different, just a different. It's not the same thing, is it? So yeah, I think looking at stratification biomarkers to kind of work out, why some autistics manage to achieve great levels of success for themselves, and maybe don't feel themselves to be impaired in any way, because they're not, and why others, are really struggling. So I think that's a good thing to do that. Now, the next thing is that I can't say that word, it's a very tricky word to say. Qualitatively different causes can underlie a smooth continuum of quantitative differences in behaviour. So, in other words, what can appear to be a kind of a smooth distribution in terms of autistic traits, merging out into the general population, underneath that seeming smooth continuum, there can be very distinct, qualitative, very distinct, very distinct causes. So different causes. Just because something on the behavioural level can appear to be similar, doesn't mean that beneath that there is the same cause, and that's a very important distinction. So they suggest that sensitive assays can distinguish between social difficulties with different causes. For example, autism versus social anxiety. So, that's to say that social anxiety can mimic autism on the behavioural level. Social anxiety, with someone with social anxiety might struggle to make eye contact, for example. They might find looking in someone's eyes to be very uncomfortable. But the reason why someone with social anxiety struggles to make eye contact is very different as to why someone who's autistic struggles to make eye contact. The person with social anxiety is constantly worrying about what others are thinking about them. They don't want to be the centre of attention. They don't want they feel very uncomfortable in someone else's presence, whereas an autistic person struggles to make eye contact because it's distracting and because on a sensory level it can be painful and very hard to listen to the other person and take in what they're saying when you're looking in their eyes. It's too much. So that's for a very different reason. A person who's socially anxious might stutter or stumble over their words, or they might avoid interacting with other people. They might not say very much. And again, this can sometimes mimic behaviour that might be seen in some autistic people, but again, the cause is very different. Whereas in autism, a person might not say very much because they don't know what to say, because they're struggling with the social side of things. Like, what do you talk about? How much information do you give? This can be very awkward, but it's a completely different reason as to from someone who's socially anxious. Now, of course, you can be autistic and have social anxiety at the same time, because social anxiety is a very common co-occurring feature in autism, but they are very distinct. Obviously, if you're socially anxious and autistic, it's obviously going to make your autism appear worse, just because it's it's adding an extra onto it. But they are different things. And so sensitive says it can distinguish between social difficulties for different causes. I would say for myself, I'm not particularly socially anxious, at least not when I'm in structured social environments where I know what's going on. I'm not a particularly socially anxious person. I talk, I share, I'm not afraid to share, I'm not afraid to kind of contribute in those situations, as long as it's structured. In unstructured social settings, that can trigger more in the way of anxiety, but I do think that's more, connected to my autism, and that is just kind of, well, it does result in more anxiety simply because I don't know what's expected of me. But I think that's an autism thing more than just a social anxiety sort of thing, because I'm not a shy person in any way, and I actually am quite comfortable being on stage. If I was a socially anxious person, I wouldn't be talking to camera right now. I don't have that level of social anxiety. I'm perfectly happy being on stage, and I could talk. Well, before my OCD got bad, and when I could go out, I was perfectly happy going on stage and talking to hundreds of people. Didn't get any anxiety. Not social anxiety at least. I do experience some degree of social consciousness, or that I never used to have when I was a lot younger. However, like this kind of fear of people judging me and stuff like that. I have more of that than when I was younger, but not to the extent of social anxiety, I would say. So what I'm saying is sensitive says it can distinguish between social difficulties and different causes, and that target distinct and separable aspects of social processing. So that's to say that there are different aspects of social processing which can be affected in autism and in the general population as well. So that's to say theory of mind versus emotional empathy versus social motivation. These are different aspects of social processing which can all result in similar behaviour, but the behaviour can be caused by different things. So someone might struggle socially because of theory of mind, but equally they could struggle because they're just simply not socially motivated. Their theory of mind might be pretty okay, but it might be a social motivation problem. Or someone else might be very socially motivated, but have really poor theory of mind, and anything in between, or a combination of all of those. So separating out these different reasons for the same behaviour is what's needed. Okay, so I'm going to move over to video number 2 now to look at the next aspect in the changing concept of autism, which is from one to many. So moving over to video number 2 now.